Deadly American strikes, and some people may have made money from them. On the online prediction platform Polymarket, a handful of bettors walked away with hundreds of thousands of dollars. The winners were either extremely lucky or extremely well-informed. More than a dozen anonymous accounts placed bets predicting that the United States would strike Iran by Saturday the 28th of February. Most of those wagers were placed in the hours before the first bombs fell, and many of the accounts had been created only days earlier.
It's Ken Harbaugh with the MeidasTouch Network. There are a lot of things about industrialized warfare that we should find grotesque. President Eisenhower, one of America's only five-star generals, warned us in his farewell address about the military-industrial complex. War has always been a way for the few to profit off the misery of the many. But when entire industries depend on the perpetuation of that misery, it becomes a kind of feedback loop. But I bet even President Eisenhower never predicted that betting markets would enter the equation. Now, we don't know the details about who placed these bets or whether they had any influence over when and whether to attack Iran, but we know they made a killing, and at least one of them claimed to be MAGA.
One of the biggest winners used the account name MAGA My Man. The trader placed $87,000 on a war with Iran exactly 71 minutes before the first strike, winning a jackpot worth $515,000. The controversy has drawn attention to Polymarket's political ties. Donald Trump's son, Donald Trump Jr., is a strategic advisor to the company and has also invested in the platform.
In the hours immediately after the U.S. attacks on Iran, I checked in with Kris Goldsmith, Army combat vet and founder of Veterans Fighting Fascism. The link to part 1 of that conversation is below. In part 2, we talk about the massive moral chasm between those like Kris who have borne the burden of America's wars and those like some in Trump's orbit who profit mightily from them. Here's our conversation. The opposite of carrying the burden of America's war making, which you did, is profiteering off of it. Mm-hmm. And we got to talk about that as well, because it's not just abstract in the sense that armaments manufacturers and the big defense companies are seeing an increase in their share price. That undoubtedly is going to happen. It's immediate and it's direct. And I'm going to flash this graphic up here of the online betting markets in the immediate run-up to the first bombs falling on Iranian cities. Notice this massive spike. People who were in on the game, who knew that these bombs were about to fall, who were in close proximity to that decision-making at the Pentagon and at the White House, made a fortune off of America going to war and using its military to kill people. How do you think about that, Kris? Because that's not actually something we had to deal with 20 years ago when we were thinking about the morality of going downrange. I mean, I guess, again, we knew about the defense contractors and all that, but the idea that people in the minutes before the decision to commit Americans to war would be making money off of it in that moment, that is a new psychic mind F. I don't swear on this show, but if ever there was a moment to, it would be now. That how must that affect the morale of people flying into harm's way or boots on the ground, knowing that people next to the president who know what he's about to do are making a fortune off of you about to risk your life?
I think that it is worthy of an FBI investigation. The fact that a TMZ podcast host was sitting in Joe's Crab Shack, which is a nice restaurant. I've been to it many times. It's about.
I don't know this story.
No. This is a true story.
This happened.
So one block away from the White House. If you go to Google Maps, you look at the White House. The White House is here. To the east is Congress. To the west is the Lincoln Memorial, right? If you draw a line one block up from the White House, there's Joe's Crab Shack. If you want to know what the Trump administration is up to, go hang out in a bar by the White House. That is the secret to being a good lobbyist. If you want to know what the Trump administration is doing, just go to the bar next to the White House or the Republican club around the corner by the house. Just minutes or hours before the war against Iran started, a TMZ host was sitting in a restaurant and listening to a bunch of people from the Trump administration talking about how the war was about to be launched. He recorded this podcast before the bombs dropped, before anyone knew that this was true. TMZ knew that Iran was going to get bombed before the American people did and before Congress did. That is a major fucking problem. And the FBI needs to investigate this, and people need to be prosecuted. That I know for a fact that restaurant has cameras. The FBI can figure out who it was who talked about secret plans to bomb another country. Where are the people betting? We don't know, because we don't have good enough laws to track these insane betting markets. But we exist in a world where the Trump administration is trying to encourage things like AI technology and crypto. All of these things make it so much easier for corrupt people to bet on a future that they ultimately have the power to shape. And there is nothing more blatantly corrupt than that. But it's also a matter of national security. It's not just about corruption and unfairness. I wish that I could bet on things and make millions of dollars because I had secret information. I wish that I could do that. But when it comes to issues of war, TMZ hosts should not be finding out about invasions or airstrikes hours before they happen because a bunch of bros from the White House are getting drunk and talking about it. That is absolutely insane that this is happening. And I don't expect this DOJ or the FBI to prosecute, but I am thankful that someday a future administration will have the opportunity to go back and figure out who these folks are.
It's Ken with a quick break to tell you about my Substack page, where you'll find bonus episodes and other exclusive content. And subscribing is a way to support this show directly without us having to rely on advertisers. For those of you who have signed up, thank you so much. It is growing harder and harder to rely on traditional media. Just look at what has happened over at CBS. So independent news is going to have to make up the gap. And if you believe in what we're trying to do here in the interviews and the commentary that this show brings you, please consider pitching in. It's free to sign up, and that itself is helpful because popular shows get recommended even more people. And if you're able to afford a paid subscription, they start at $8 a month. Every dollar goes back into what we're doing. Thanks for helping out. The FBI of Kash Patel certainly won't prosecute. I'm not sure they're even capable of it. You and I have been sounding the alarm for months about the incompetence of this administration and how it's funny until it isn't, until American lives are on the line. I don't know if the administration's incompetence has yet led to American deaths overseas. I suspect it has. If you read about the warnings about that headquarters in Kuwait that was hit, there certainly were warnings that it wasn't adequately protected. Mm-hmm. But I think we're about to find out what incompetence at home when it comes to counterterrorism leads to. The fact that Kash Patel dismissed the agents at the FBI with the most intimate knowledge about Iran, the fact that you still have a 22-year-old, maybe he's 23 years old now, a blogger in charge of counterterrorism at DHS, the Department of Homeland Security, whose only qualification appears to have been pro-Trump posts. I'm not going to draw a direct line between what happened in Austin at that nightclub and this level of incompetence, but somebody at some point is. And I sure as heck hope the American people wake up to the fact that it's funny until it isn't. Yeah. And when you vote for an incompetent administration that intentionally, by the way, this is not an accident of not being able to find the right people. The story of every autocrat in history is that their survival depends on being surrounded by people less competent than they are. That's what we bought with this president, and we're starting to reap the whirlwind.
The fascist playbook is well established. Historians have been telling us exactly what would happen under the second Trump administration. The incompetence of the national security apparatus will ultimately make us vulnerable. The attack in Austin, we still don't know a lot about it, but the early indicators are that it was inspired as retaliation for the war in Iran. We should understand that this type of attack is very likely to become more common. One of the many reasons why the U.S. and the Iranian regime have had so much conflict is because Iran is very good at recruiting foreign fighters and training them and making them competent. Iran has gotten death squads into the United States who have moved towards killing Iranian journalists here in the U.S. Now, thankfully, the FBI figured that out and there have been prosecutions. But these death squads have already gotten here. And thankfully, some of them have been prosecuted. But I don't want to spread, the idea like this is not a conspiracy theory. I'm talking about this has already happened. There have already been death squads who've already tried to kill Iranian journalists here in the United States, not in the middle of nowhere, but in New York City. The FBI used to be able to concentrate on those kinds of foreign threats. Something like 1/3 of all field agents, 1/3 of the FBI has been taken off of complex investigations like that. And instead they're sitting in Home Depot parking lots, taking notes on brown people, standing outside trying to get a job. And I mean this literally. Like one of my close friends, their spouse works for the FBI. And instead of working on complex financial crimes, she is deployed to sit in parking lots to help ICE, which is absolutely insane. And fascists always use foreign conflicts to justify domestic crackdowns. There will be more American casualties abroad. There is very likely going to be at least attempts at terrorist attacks here in the United States. And we are more defenseless than we should be because Donald Trump and Kash Patel have decided to focus on ripping apart families and jailing children and mothers than they are with actual real terrorists who could be working towards mass casualty events right now.
Dark stuff, Kris. I do want to end with that promised high note about this victory we achieved against the Veterans Administration after they tried to pull this move in the dead of night. And well, you lay it out for us. What were they trying to get away with and how did we stop them?
So in February, the Department of Veterans Affairs put forward a rule that would make it so that the people who rate veterans' disability benefits, you get a percentage which comes with a monetary value for compensation, right? So if you have absolutely traumatic PTSD that you cannot recover from, you'll get 100%. And that'll mean a few $1,000s a month in income that can help to keep your life stable. If you lose a leg, you get a few $1,000s, right? That's the way these things work. The rule that they promoted, that they put so that it would immediately take effect without reaching out to veterans organizations or any stakeholders whatsoever. They just made this in effect immediately, would make it so that veterans get paid for the symptoms that they have after medication. So that means that someone like me, who is objectively successful in many ways. I have an Ivy League degree. I run 2 nonprofits. I'm a business owner. I'm running multiple businesses. I, have been in documentaries and newspapers and all this stuff, right? But I've also gone through many years since I've come home from Iraq of unemployability. The most recent, just like 2 years ago, and it was like a full year where I was just an absolute wreck, right? That is why I get paid for severe post-traumatic stress disorder, because without that cushion, I could not be able to pay my mortgage. I might not be able to pay the taxes that I need to pay. I have a daughter in childcare now. Formula is expensive, right? That is what disability payments are for. What the Trump administration wanted to do was look at me on my best day and pay me for that. And be like, oh, well, you're fine. You're sitting in front of a camera. You're doing your job right now. So you should be compensated according to those abilities. That's like taking someone who lost a leg. Many of my friends have. And because they've got a prosthetic and they can jog on that prosthetic because prosthetics have advanced, that'd be like the Trump administration saying, well, it's like your leg never disappeared. It's like it was never gone. So you shouldn't be compensated for that. You can still walk fine. We got the Trump administration to pull that back after Secretary Doug Collins tried to gaslight us.
Before you detail the win, I just want to point out one other thing as someone who has been part of the system as well. The enormous disincentive to veterans who are looking for care, being told that if you get care and get better, you're not going to be compensated anymore. I mean, the effects this would have downstream on veterans who need help would have been catastrophic. Yeah. How did we turn it back?
Yeah, and I had a bunch of veterans who saw the reporting about this and reached out to me and said, like, oh my God, like, how am I going to feed my family? Like, I need to stop going to the VA. That was the immediate effect. As soon as the true story, it's black and white. They put it in print. As soon as the true story of Doug Collins trying to make it so that a new rule would strip disabled veterans of their benefits, veterans were immediately canceling appointments. Veterans were immediately considering not taking their medication because they were immediately thinking, well, either I can't feed my family or I have to just suffer through this. And that is a terrible, terrible ultimatum to give to veterans. Now, thankfully, we forced the Trump administration to retreat. Secretary Doug Collins at first said, oh, this is fake news. And then he said, oh, actually, yeah, the rule is there, but we're just not going to enforce it. Well, if you're not going to enforce the rule, then why put it in the books? What is your purpose, right? Of course, you're going to enact it. You want to take away veterans' benefits, just like you want to gut the VA. These are all things that he says he's not doing, but it's like, we see that the VA number of VA staff is decreasing. We see the increase in the need being met with a decrease in the number of doctors, nurses, and other VA employees who provide all sorts of critical services to veterans, right? We're not going to be gaslighted. Thankfully, the entire veterans community, from the biggest MAGA supporters on the right to everyone else, spoke out and said, no, this is not acceptable. And we forced them to withdraw. However, people need to be aware that the Trump administration is right now appealing a court decision that would effectively, if overturned, would have the same effect. It would make it so that VA raters, people who rate veterans for disabilities, would look at the vet on their best day post medication and say, you're not disabled anymore, so you're not getting paid. That will mean instability for millions. There are 9 million patients at the Department of Veterans Affairs. I think there are 6 million disabled veterans. All of those families would lose stability. Now, the Trump administration wants to gaslight us and say, oh, well, it's not old veterans. It'll just be the new veterans. Like, oh, okay. We as veterans are supposed to say that future veterans it's okay to screw them, right? That is what they're trying to get us to do. And I'm not going to do it. I work for Vietnam Veterans America. Their founding principle, their motto was never again will one generation of veterans abandon another. Yep. We are going to fulfill that motto until death. That is a commitment that I know that every veteran of the global war on terror before and after, we all share. Never again will one generation of veterans abandon another. So we have to remain aware that the Trump administration, though they backed off of this rule change, they are still, the Department of Veterans Affairs and the Department of Justice are still trying to get the courts to do the same thing instead so that they can pass the blame over to the courts.
Well, got to leave it there, Kris. Thanks, as always, for joining us.
Thanks a lot, brother.
Love this video? Support independent media and unlock exclusive content, ad-free videos, and custom emojis by becoming a paid member of our YouTube channel today. You can also gift memberships to others. Let's keep growing together.